ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, as far as the Gettysburg Address is concerned, I suppose it's what you might call a work in progress. Folks might be somewhat surprised to learn that it's something that I'm actually still working on. It's never really finished in my mind. It kind of took its first shape in October 1863 when I received at the White House an invitation to deliver a few brief appropriate remarks at the dedication of the National Soldiers Cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. That's when I first started to think about what I wanted to say. I knew that I wouldn't have a lot of time to speak, that there would be music and other orations going on. So I had to be very, very precise and very, very careful in my comments. So I started writing down my thoughts. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. Now, the way that I would usually write a speech is I would get an idea here or there or a sentence that would come into mind. I would write it down on a slip of paper. Where that slip of paper then would go would be right into my stovepipe hat. Once I had about 25 or 40 pieces of paper in my hat, then I could sit down at my desk in the White House, lay those slips of paper out, and sort of craft a semblance of a speech. I don't recall that the Gettysburg Address was created quite in that manner. It seems to me that I wrote out my first draft and looked at it, considered it over a period of 4 weeks or so from the time I received my invitation to go to Gettysburg and deliver a few brief appropriate remarks until the 19th when the speech was actually delivered. I recall that I wasn't quite satisfied with a word here or a phrase there. I knew that I had precious little time to deliver that address. As it turned out, somewhat less than 3 minutes. I knew that my words had to be very, very carefully crafted. I had to choose each one very, very subtly to just get across the feelings that I had, to inspire people who would hear that speech and who would later read it to understand why that terrible civil war was taking place and had to take place. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. But by the time I got on the train on the 18th of November 1863 to travel to Gettysburg, I pretty much had the shape of my speech intact. I did do a little revision work on the evening of November 18th at the house of Mr. Wills in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I also did a little more revision work on the morning of the 19th. And now, to be completely honest, and I do believe it's important to be honest, I was even thinking about some changes in my speech while I was riding on horseback with my white gloves to the dedication ceremony itself. And I was even thinking about changing a word or two as I sat through Edward Everett's 2-hour oration on the platform at Gettysburg that afternoon of the 19th. And I probably even changed a word or two as I delivered the address itself, even though it was a short address, only lasting about 2 minutes and 42 seconds. I was satisfied with the Gettysburg Address. I'm very, very satisfied to hear how well it's held up over the many years since I delivered it. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure. You know, I never got all the education that I wanted to. I probably only got about a year's worth of public education back in Kentucky and Indiana. And actually, I envy what I understand to be public education now, how children can go to school for so many years and learn so much, and have the opportunity to study, and reflect upon historical documents. Think about what folks like myself had in mind when they were crafting those documents, and what those documents might mean to them in their own current lives. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Even the president